Welcome to your peaceful escape. Tonight, I invite you to journey into a world of tranquility where your mind can wander and your body can rest. This is your time to unwind, to let go of the day's worries, and to prepare yourself for a deep, rejuvenating sleep. In just a moment, I'll guide you through a serene story about Leah from Andromeda to gently ease you into a state of relaxation. The story will transport you to a place where the stresses of the world melt away, leaving only calm and serenity. After our story, you'll be enveloped in a soothing ambiance designed to carry you into the deepest realms of sleep. This gentle soundscape will linger, wrapping you in comfort and quietude as you drift off, allowing you to rest fully and wake refreshed. So, find a comfortable position, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to sink into this moment. Let the story unfold like a soft whisper in the night, guiding you into a peaceful slumber. Now, close your eyes, relax your mind, and let the story begin. When I was a boy, I questioned. At times when I observed the beautiful nights in which was displayed to my infantile sight a sky full of beautiful scintillating lights, if those diminutive stars were tiny fairies that swarmed in space, making it shine with their magic, how distant it was to imagine that some of them may possess a planetary system similar to ours, much less that they could shelter life identical to our own in some hidden place out in the vastness of the universe. Is that why we unconsciously inherited the pride of man of believing that he is the only intelligent living being in this immense sea of space bodies? Is it true that we were always the only beings traveling in space above the sphere called Earth? In these later years, something extraordinary would come to make me change my opinion. It would come as an unexpected flash, making me modify all my habits and customs. The skeptic, in the winter of his life, was about to have a rare experience. It was through this surprise that life allowed me to know an extraterrestrial woman. Her name? Leah. Her origin? A distant planet called Inxtria, a part of the Andromeda Galaxy. Her age? Almost a millennium. She gave me sufficient proofs to leave no doubt of affirmation. I concluded, as a result of my discussions with her, that other men of other systems of planets also take part and share with us terrestrials the enormous sidereal ocean that surrounds us. I knew then that to live is to encounter a routine of unexpected happenings, to continually gather events to fill the pages of an existential book of gold, transcribing day after day, with lines always distinct. The rest of my life I will be leaving marks on roads of maps never suspected by the human being. Destiny imposes on us a route through which we adapt resignedly, or we do not exist in accordance with our internal possibilities. But was one mortal privileged for having had the opportunity to know a woman such as this, or is he sentenced to live before the constant expectation of an uncertain future? I do not know. Nobody knows. If I had not been foretold, I would not have believed it. Nevertheless, I must admit that during this long period of sustained talks between Leah and I, aboard a spaceship, was when I come to know many things not only of my world, this great unknown even for its own inhabitants, but of other planets, of other civilizations. Some believe not others. Doubt not only that there are intelligent beings in our solar system besides us, but who exist beyond the Milky Way. But should I likewise doubt it when I have touched it, lived it? And should I be prohibited to partake of my experiences only because I have been perhaps the only man in my country, if not the world, to have lived this happening? Nevertheless, despite the incredibility of my adventure with Leah, I lived it intensely, not only with suspicion, with fear, with dread, with uncertainty or with doubts, but with surprise, with fascination, and with the emotion of an adolescent. I came in the paroxysm of my experiences to ask myself, why me? Is it true that all this is happening, or only a fragment of some insignificant passage? Perhaps my subconscious is playing a joke on me? No. It was another thing whose parallelism could only be found in the word rare. There came an accumulation of questions in my mind during the length of my conversations with her. However, there also came hundreds of answers. It was then that I let myself be conducted through the splendid experience offered me, and thus it was that the time passed with its precious circumstantial charge. After accepting the existence of beings on other planets, I was relieved of the idea that we terrestrials are the only ones in such a sidereal arena if the dilemma was to believe or not believe also. The solution was to dispossess myself of all pride, of chronic skepticism, which would lead me to doubt even what I saw. Perhaps in the future they will come to accept the idea that today it seems absurd to us, but through the years to come it may seem more logical. And then you and I can believe in the possibility of infinite intergalactic life. The facts and events that follow are truly expressed and form a part of the circumstances, as exotic as incredible, which came to happen on our planet from a time of the beginning to this date. Facts at times repudiated and ignored by science, but which, unfortunately for those who do not believe them, do not exist. I can assure you that flying saucers, given that they exist, are not constructed by any power on Earth. President Harry Truman Press Conference, Washington, D.C., April 4th, 1950. The beginning. Leah, a woman of extraterrestrial origin, beautiful, intelligent, and noble, arrived at a most unexpected moment in my life. Nevertheless, this came to pass several years before I understood the magnitude of her presence on our planet Earth. I was able to count almost 50 years of age when I saw her for the first time. I was already at that time a confirmed skeptic of all that related to parapsychology, telekinesis, and incredible phenomena such as spontaneous combustion. But above all, I believed it a waste of time to believe in the existence of extraterrestrial beings. I shared the opinion of many scientists concerning evolution. Also, I had carried on long conversations with astronomer colleagues who had assured me of never having seen anything floating or flying in space that were not our satellites or spacecraft sent into space by man of Earth. My mind was blank can this aspect. It began to fill as I matured, and I knew that as a university professor I could not give credit to that which lately they have called pseudoscience. I had not only commented on this with my students concerning themes of importance, but with my own colleagues as well. I felt completely accomplished, absolutely satisfied with life. However, I knew that I was beginning to reach maturity because my thoughts returned frequently to the past, but my present was really fulfilled. I had the privilege of being counselor to the majority of my students. Into this circumstantial arena she came. Leah appeared in my life so suddenly that I had to let several years elapse to begin to describe the presence and teachings CT her. I felt at the time that the point of departure was not so far away, and that the end of my existence approached irresistibly, like the goal of the runner or like the set of the sun in the west. I believed that my professional stage was finalizing without imagining in the least that Leah would bring to my existence something for which to fight. It came in the moment in which the love for things became indelible. It came at the time when circumstances move one emotionally, the age in which nothing is rejected, and on the other hand, yes, all is possible. At this time I feel thankful with the world, with God, for all that which has been granted me without my having merited it. My parents had wrapped me in diapers soft as silk at birth, and the first air that I breathed had a pleasing scent of roses from the enormous garden that surrounded the house. Now I have 3 beautiful children and wife. What could I possibly desire? Thinking on this, I waited with resignation the winter of my life. The fruit of my existence had filled my life of satisfactions. Each day that passed teaching classes at the university gave me the satisfaction of having sown the seeds of knowledge, and that precisely this had been my great opportunity. My walk through the wide roads of this world had not been still. As tenured professor of the university and as investigator of nuclear mathematical physics, I knew that I had arrived at the limits of my professional life. I perceived the respect of my superiors. Years before, I had received a national prize in physics. Thus, in these circumstances was when Leah came to me, and I must admit that since then never left my mind nor my heart. I was not a youth easily influenced. I was well rooted in my habits, and likewise as well in my opinions. But how did this all begin? Was there anything magic in the encounter? Was it accidental or intentional? I never knew. November 14th, 1977. Today, Tuesday, while I was at the university attending a conference on odontopediatrics, I saw her for the first time. I was standing at the back of the room. There was a beautiful young woman of slightly Asiatic characteristics, brown skin and slender body. Her hair was long and wavy and fell languidly over her shoulders. She was dressed entirely in black, wearing tailored slacks and blouse of the same material, which to me seemed like laminated plastic. She had persistent amber eyes. It seemed like her eyes were pointed directly at me, and I could feel her gaze even in the obscurity of the roar. There was an instant in which our looks coincided, and I felt a strange chill run over my whole body. Despite my vain attempts to concentrate on the exposition of the class, I could not. In my mind, the figure of that young woman, as enigmatic as fascinating, remained etched. But when I again looked toward the group, I noticed that she was no longer there. I searched the room to see if I could find her seated in some other place, but no, she was not there. I looked toward the door, and it occurred to me that this had been closed. At that time, I did not deem it important. The first shadows of evening had already appeared when the exposition ended. I went to the parking lot and got into my car. I was experiencing a strange sensation of well-being, and I unconsciously turned on the radio to listen for the news, but it did not work right. I could hear only heavy static. Perhaps the antenna, I thought, but upon checking this, I found it all right. I tried to synchronize the apparatus without success. I could turn nothing on. I was about to turn the radio off when I heard a new noise more, new static, and then silence. After that, I began to clearly hear a hollow, metallic voice that slowly began to articulate words in perfect Spanish. Finally, the voice spoke without interference and said in perfect accent, "You are connected to our frequency, Earthman. You have entered the primary phase, and it will be easy in what follows, which I want to repeat. You are going to have news." I was disconcerted, but at that moment I did not relate the one thing with the other. Later, sometime after the voice had disappeared, I continued thinking and trying to discover the significance of this. His radio remained dead for a little more than a half hour. After the same manner that the frequency had gone, I heard a melody. The route to my house seemed long, but later I noticed with surprise that I had been making big circles, as if subconsciously I did not want to get to my destination. I shook my head, which had begun to feel heavy, trying to dismiss these ideas. At that time I did not the voice of the message with the woman I had seen at the university. A little while later I was comfortably seated in my favorite chair with a refreshment at hand, reading when I fell into a profound sleep. December 18th, 1972. More than a month passed. I had almost forgotten the encounter with the woman, as attractive as mysterious. Today I got up without ever imagining that I would have another encounter with her. This time it was in a place completely different. It happened in an open-air restaurant along the Avenida Insurgentes. While I was breakfasting with Carlos, a friend and colleague for years, I looked toward the entrance door and I saw her. In the light of day, her beauty stood out. In her were combined characteristics as exotic as natural, but her personality was such that characterized her. But upon seeing her, I felt a mixture of tenderness, of knowledge, of peace and internal tranquility. She was accompanied by a man dressed in a uniform with an insignia on the left side of his breast. It was a gold triangle inside of which was a blue circle. The man was stylishly good-looking also, and a little taller than her. Leah must measure more than 1.9 thousand meters. He almost touched the top of the door with his head. Instinctively I got to my feet. The look of Carlos and the ridiculousness of my reaction made me remember that I should not be so impulsive. "What happened?" asked Carlos. "Pardon me, I thought it was another person whom I have not seen in some time," I said, lying. At 5 in the afternoon, I had to teach a class, and I looked at my watch. It was scarcely 10 in the morning. I needed to know who she was, but why such sudden interest renewed in a woman of much beauty, but of whom I knew absolutely nothing? After we finished eating, Carlos and I left for the university. I decided along the way that I would begin to investigate that beautiful woman. I reviewed my listings of students, but there was no new student such as her, nor did I have knowledge of the presence of any person as an auditor in my class. Further, I decided that here I would begin to take a certain care to only see her. Of one thing I was convinced: she was real. She was not a vision created by my mind. She really existed. It was not until the 12th of January when I had my third encounter. The classroom was darkened. This was because I was projecting slides to illustrate my lecture. While I was running the transparency, she entered. At the moment I was stunned. Here again was that woman, always dressed in black. She had entered at the moment I was discussing the most important point. Perhaps my students had not observed my disturbance in the obscurity of the room, and also because the transparencies were occupying their attention. I felt her gaze, seeming that her eyes had their own light. She stared fixedly without blinking, but far from feeling nervousness, her gaze infused an indescribable calm and inner peace. I was trying to calculate her age. I thought she might be 30 years old. That was a little old to be my student, but considering that there are people who study for 2 or more careers, this detail could pass unnoticed. When the class ended, I turned on the lights only to observe that she had disappeared in the shadow of the doorway. I opened a path through my students, but when I finally could get out, she was no longer there. I asked a youth who had been near the door if he had seen a woman of her characteristics. He looked at me like one would observe a bacterium under a microscope and, glancing with sneer, answered negatively. During my 25 years as a professor, never has anything like this happened to me before. I felt grieved. I blamed myself. I am 50 years old, and I am acting like an adolescent in his first passes as a conquistador. I went back into the room, picked up my books, and secured the projector and transparencies and left. I still had to walk a good distance before getting to my automobile. Meanwhile, I walked reflectively. I got in my car and headed for my house. Ever since then, and without my suspecting it, someone, in some part of the universe, has been making plans to establish some kind of friendship with me. But was my imagination more fantastic than I could have dreamed? And why a skeptic? Why me? Thus began to knit in turn for me the maze of knowledge that filled my consciousness, of doubts, of illusion. But still it lacked the most important part. Our first discussion, December 22nd, 1974. Due to the intense work that we were engaged in at the laboratory of the university, some colleagues and I had agreed to finalize all the tests, which would take us to the end still in time for vacation. This was very important as we were working on a new vaccine. The empty classrooms were cold and full of silence. The air felt lighter, and the gardens lie resting from their normal activity. While analyzing a cell under the microscope, I imagined that the solitude might inspire us to carry on our labor. While awaiting the cellular reaction, I leaned my head against the window to feel the weak rays of the sun that came through the glass. It was a cold day, but absolutely clear, beautiful. While looking toward the hallway, I saw her. Standing out beside a door, she looked directly toward where I was. She gave me the impression that I had known her all my life. As I looked at her, I felt a relaxation such that it produced in me an incredible happiness. Emotionally reinvigorated should be the word. And if I had sang and danced, it would not have seemed strange to me. I experienced also an undefinable association between her and I, still at a distance. Her presence seemed completely familiar to me. It was as if something in my interior awaited her without having advised me. I turned my work over to a colleague and went down, a little to be sure she was still there, and another such impulse that I didn't know what, which attracted me irresistibly toward that place. At 2 or 3 meters I stopped. She smiled, but in her smile there was no evil, nor any coquetteness. It was a sweet look, and therefore a candid smile, like one who greets with pleasure the return of a friend. "Good day, Professor," she greeted me. "Good day, Senorita," was my response. I looked at her profoundly while she extended her hand. "It may seem strange, but to me you seem so familiar, so well known, that I would judge that you and I have already had a pact at a level of friendship." I told her, "Professor, I have come to look for you. I have tried to make these encounters, having come precisely to see you. The strangeness is not that you have expected to see me, but that you would have the occasion to see and hear afterward." "You've come to find me?" I asked, full of surprise. "Thus it is. My name is Leah, and on the Earth, as well as in other parts of the universe, my mission is to investigate all types of intelligent life, its association with the planet, its adaptability, and the biological social prolongation in its development." "What are you trying to say? What other parts of the universe?" "I shall explain, Professor. I am not of this planet. I come from one that is thousands of light years from Earth. I am part of an investigative group. How? I asked, still without believing what I was hearing. Yes, I know that you do not believe now this that I tell you. Members of the group to which I belong and I have tried to open telepathic communication, but we felt that this could have disturbed you a little emotionally, for which we decided on direct communication. You are an objective and analytical man. It will be very difficult for us to overcome your skepticism. You yourself, at the end of all this, will be able to analyze with empathy all that I have said to you. We know that you do not believe all that you receive through the bioelectric telepathic stimulus. You are an honest receiver, but our intentions would not change the results if we did not speak to you directly. What is it that you are intending to make me leave my way of life? I have heard of persons who spend their life jumping from one fantasy to another, but what you say surpasses the limits of imagination, I said, getting angry. So, Professor, I know that for you it is difficult to believe, but finally you will accept our existence, which is not as brain-busting as the existence of the human being on the earth. Or do you believe perhaps that a being of this planet would be able to doubt your existence still while I am looking at you? Momentarily I felt confused. Pardon, I must go to my work, I said in a manner of excuse. Look, Professor, peer directly into my eyes and think of something that interests you, or something that is not fixed in your cerebral neurons, though being imaginative. Oh, yourself. And that why? I can know what you think, she added. I laughed incredulously. Try IT, she insisted. I could not lose anything. I closed my eyes, and in my mind I began to pronounce the Greek alphabet. Oh, no, Professor, she said, the Greek alphabet is too simple. Think of something else. Ask me a question in your mind. I mentally asked, is it true that you come from another planet? She answered me, yes. I could have been surprised, or perhaps she could have made me nervous. Nevertheless, I felt profoundly relaxed and also experimented with unusual mental concentration. If in truth you come from another planet, how is it that you speak perfectly in Spanish? I asked. On my world, they take very little time to learn a language. We dedicate ourselves to knowledge. It takes us very little time to know a planet in all its totality. What do you want, or what do they want of me? I asked. Not only of you, she responded. We hope that we will be given the opportunity to explain all that has been discussed with us. Because of our presence here on Earth, many are afraid, terrified. They look on us as divine beings, celestials, but we nevertheless are like you, with some variations. We love life. It seems to us an affront to the same universe that the intelligent beings live opting for the mistaken line. They express themselves with violence and live in ignorance. But the rescue of worlds such as yours is not permitted, at least to us, nor are we permitted to defend other people who live in constant bellicosity and live in constant fear of other people through extended frontier lines. Your planet has no overseer. No part of the earth carries this distinction. That is what we study. We analyze the life also of planets like yours. We study the beings who possess a short life, like you, for example. And also we study the human reaction faced with death. Why do you say planets like ours? I inquired. Because on planets like ours, death does not exist, or there are almost no deaths to speak of. And for this you have come. Perhaps you are representatives of a new religion for which you are presenting. I must say I am feeling little thanks, thinking that I am the victim of some scheme. No, Professor, don't think that. In the same manner that you are carrying out an investigation of cellular reaction to obtain or to try to obtain a vaccine. In the same way, we work to eradicate many similar factors that could prejudice a great number of races which, distributed throughout the universe, do not know or have lost the capacity of knowledge concerning the eradication of antigens. How do you know what I am working on? I asked in surprise. I know much about you. Ask and I will respond. How is it that there are races that do not die? How old are you? The cellular degeneration brought as a consequence of decrepitude or old age produces a constant anxiety in the human being. The fear of dying or to cease being is reflected in the fear that man has of death. Many races have found the way to prolong life. This for you would be a secret that has ceased being such in my world, in which biological prolongation is no secret, but now universal knowledge. About my age, I am young in relation to many of my race type. I am almost 900 years old, or 9 centuries if you prefer it that way. I will respond to many of your questions, but for now I desire that you meditate on our discussion, that you not comment on, not for now. I may surprise you that at times I am near to you, very near, for now I want you to know that when our conversation is still telepathic, you can sometimes produce it yourself. Our communication will be as direct as you permit. And if I deny it? I asked, still incredulous, though no less flattered to be conversing with such a beautiful woman. She looked at me a long time, reading perhaps each of my thoughts. Then she said, "Do not deny it, Professor. You are educated. The same as I, you try to apply all the physiological knowledge that is at hand to know me still more. You fear that I am playing a prank on you, and desire to submit me to some study to understand my mind. I, Professor, could refuse to respond, and nevertheless I have come to this, to converse with you about your world, about the future of this fabulous planet called Earth. I can tell you that not only we have been visiting your Earth, there are many civilizations which have done this, and almost all are in agreement that your world is a privileged place. For now, Professor, be a little calm, relax, think, and above all, guard our secret. In due time, we can talk." She extended her hand in goodbye. I wanted to take myself out of all this. I felt fear. It seemed to me that I could be stopped at a point from which I might be easily pushed. Am I the victim of a joke? Who would be interested in playing such on me? Perhaps someone who well knew my points of view concerning beings of other worlds. But are they reading my mind this way? Speaking Greek also? This was still at the point of beginning. The rest, the unknown, the surprising, the incredible would come with the passage of the months, with the transpiring of years, and nobody would leave off questioning me. Why me? 3 lethal belt around the planet, April 22nd, 1975. I did not ask for it, nor did I even think about it, but nevertheless I am traveling in the spaceship with Leah. I had gone to participate in a conference on the theme of effective neutralizers for anesthesia. That afternoon, I felt particularly exhausted. I had been speaking for almost 2 hours without interruption. At the end of the lecture, I still had, among my notes, several unanswered questions. Some students and I went out into the corridor, still talking a little as we parted and went our separate ways. As I headed for the parking lot, I scarcely imagined that Leah was waiting for me in the car. She smiled candidly. My expression of surprise must have seemed amusing. "Hello," she said in greeting. Are you in much of a hurry? No, it is only that I want to rest, I said. Would you like to go on a mission as co-pilot? I introduced the key into the door lock still without answering. I placed my papers and my portfolios in the rear seat and sat down. I started the motor and turned to look at her. Today has been an especially tiring day. All morning at the university, lunch at midday, and all afternoon in conference. Couldn't this be another day? I asked, almost pleading. It was quiet for a moment, and I turned to look toward the exit. In a low voice, she said, "It is important. I cannot assure you that you will have another opportunity like this." "And this mission, is it very far?" I asked. "That depends very much on how your concepts of time and space are developed." "Very well," I said as I locked the door. "If it is not too far, I accept." How far it was I could not imagine, since for her, time and distance do not exist, nor had she considered whether it was too late or too early to undertake some action. I never saw her look at a watch, nor did I know that neither space nor distance needed any hurry. Leah, her people, her folk, and perhaps beings of other worlds with the same characteristics as her, do not know the limitations of this so-called time, distance, or space. For her, to exist is it, simply, without the units of timetable or distance. Leah lived at entire liberty, en route. While I was stopped for a red light semaphore, she said to me, "Close your eyes." I obeyed. I felt her hand touch my forehead. At that instant, the muscles of my face relaxed, my head cleared, my mind concentrated, and my body little by little began to recover its vigor. All this at the contact of her hand. "There it is," she said, signaling. The light turned green. "Let us go." "Toward where?" I asked. "Go toward the north. I will guide you." After 2 hours and a half this way, we came to a trunk route between Hidalgo and Querétaro. We stopped at a separated place where there was an abundance of cactus. It was quite late. I looked at my watch, 9:30 p.m. Now I began to feel anxiety about the prospect of a possible assault. Again, I was tired, or could it be nervousness? Again, the hand on my forehead. Once more the vigor recuperated. All was silent. "We are going to park here," she said, indicating a place to one side of the road. "We're going to get out here?" I asked in surprise. "To leave the car in this place could be dangerous for you and for me too," I said, admitting my cowardice. "We have to walk toward there," she said, while her finger indicated a place that could not be distinguished in the dark. "But, Leah, this car is my major possession, and if it is stolen, how will we return?" "You don't have to worry. We have avoided anybody being able to see your car from any angle." I put my hand down on the car. She took my hand at the wrist, and I began to experience a genuine confidence. I let go of my fears, my worries, even the most hidden, or those of distant times that live in the most profound regions of my psyche. At that moment, I felt an indescribable happiness. We began to walk. "To where do we go?" I asked. "We will fly around your world," she responded. I looked at her, trying to discover if this was some kind of a joke. Her face had acquired an unusual seriousness for her. "Now?" I asked, stuttering. "Yes, now. Couldn't this wait?" "What you will see today cannot wait, Professor." It was unusual that I would go at the hand of Leah, always with me behind her, bewildered more that it was dark, and opening my eyes wider at each step. For her it was routine, for me everything was surprising. A round object of more or less 3 meters diameter was some meters in front of us. Leah took out an apparatus of metal that was like a small box of cigarettes and pressed a button. At that moment, the door of that ship opened itself from below, and we went through into the interior by means of a small ladder. We sat down. There were only 2 seats. She sat down before what would be a computer console with bars of colors, illuminated as if they were in operation. She touched a small lever with various buttons and pressed one. The ladder retracted through the small port, and the opening closed. The ship silently rose into the air. In front of us, a window opened as if someone parted a veil, and there appeared in front of my surprised eyes the lights of the cities. After that, tiny points and supposedly oceans. From that, I deduced that we were flying at a fantastic velocity. The earth withdrew more and more, and thus I could contemplate the night, the stars, and later dozens of satellites of all types orbiting the earth. Far beyond was a light of pale blue or lilac that marked the line that divides night and day, and I understood that all is not completely dark, nor is all absolutely light on my world. I looked at Leah, who, absorbed, seemed to be looking likewise at me. "This is a voyage of exploration," she said, "not precisely routing, though. To you, it might seem so." She said, grinning, "To me it seems like a trip out of the world beyond my comprehension." Within me I thought, this is the single most surprising trip in my life. In that instant I understood many things. Looking at the planet, there came to my mind a succession of strange ideas to my own understanding. The blue planet, as Leah had one time called the Earth, had thousands of millions of years in its existence. But it is not easy for the human being to comprehend why and fear what purpose it floats in the universe, renewing one by one those cycles of life implanted in the world. In this immensity, I asked several times, looking at the planar surrounded by objects with antennas, why? Why is man? Why is the earth? Why such pride, vanity, arrogance, and hate? To understand life as I have lived it, plus the years that I propose to live it, I could contemplate for only a moment. "Look below," she suddenly said. I looked and saw the planet in all its magnitude, on the sunlit side showing Asia. "Adjust the light refractor," she said. "That is the blue limit. Can you perceive anything?" "Some satellites in orbit, and observe well, and you will see something like a rosy halo, like a belt that expands. At first sight you may not be able to notice it, but with the refractor, yes. Have you noticed that the same refractor takes on the inverse effect of the light, first violet, red, and then blue? In the other manner one cannot detect the elements that make up the belt. Our refractor computes an analysis of the chemical components of that halo." "Can you see it?" she said. "Oh yes, I can see it. The button also activates the ultrasensor in a manner that if we approach and enter the influence of the belt, you should be able to hear even the sounds or the atoms in movement. Normally it is not perceived by any sound. Moreover, the small blue button that is on the band also functions as a sensor for detection of the metals of which it is composed and the gases that unite the conjunction of elements. Any mineral united with another produces some type of gas, whether it is perceptible or not. The murmur made by the atoms when they graze one another, slight as it is, can be heard clearly through the sensor. The friction of one atom with another produces a tiny explosion. Why is that? I will explain. In these latest years, the characteristics of the atmosphere around the Earth has been modified to such a point that those experts have been forced to examine different theories at international level to try to interpret these changes and to try to discover comparative parameters with the objective of exploring its origins. Almost all countries have suffered climatic changes. Rains in torrents raise the rivers, flooding lakes and artificial water reservoirs. Meters of snow fall that not only cover the houses and roads, but which chill the earth, the air also, and the temperatures rise and fall out of control. Very well. You are observing the principal cause of this climatic reaction that provokes a thermic involvement on the earth. The manner is such that when it is cold it is sharp, and when the sun's rays penetrate these gases, they are sharpened and concentrated. Look well at the belt which surrounds the earth. All that is a product of many circumstances. One of them, the nuclear chemical test, has succeeded in neutralizing the ozone gas protector from the solar rays. Due to this, the atmosphere suffers a severe ionization loss, which itself provokes the gasified molecules to stimulation by the ultraviolet rays. The condensation of water together with gases provokes alterations, produces cyclones, hurricanes, etc. The snowfalls lash the cities, as well as the small towns. Though they receive no frequent precipitation, it has not manifested yet, but you will come to suffer very sharp climatic changes on your earth. Due to these phenomena, it is very likely that arid zones will change and that soon vegetation will abound in these areas. This will also facilitate the solar rays, which now fall directly on the earth, to precipitate with greater intensity on zones such as the north or south poles and provoke important thaws. This also, as I have told you before, will generate inundations. Look, by the middle of the 80s and still beyond into the 90s will fall ever worse rains and snows. We are now passing right over Kansk, a city in Siberia. Open your refractor, press the yellow button, it will give you data on the climate. In these times, the thermometer in recent years has read minus 60 degrees centigrade. Now it is only minus 40 degrees C. Also, the climate is modifying, and some parts that were only ice begin to bring forth vegetation. The solar rays, the same that stimulate the changes on Earth, in the waters and in the air, also modify the life of the flora and the fauna. At the root of this, the calamities proliferate, the organic action suffers stimulation in its molecules, and those organisms are going to develop themselves in these places where all of these phenomena occur with greater frequency. The solar rays are energy, an energy out of control without the natural filtration of the ozone, which reacts directly on all types of molecules. At the same time, they stimulate the production of greater growth. The flies, bees, and insects of all kinds are suffering organic changes. Imagine the changes they suffer and compare that with a ship that flies at great velocity in space. And I can tell you that that is the velocity that not only the flora, but also the fauna, and man as well, are suffering important changes at the organic level and consequently also at a mental level. That belt, is it a danger to humanity? Yes, its components are in general mineral solids that emerge as a consequence of fusion gases and which in time are re-encountering their true origin, and they crystallize until they form into new gases due to the alloying with other metals, which by attraction continue adhering one by one, making each time more dense the belt, whose force is great and accordingly condenses even more. This, beyond the softening of the filtering of the solar rays, now condenses then. If, as is supposed, the nuclear tests continue, the circle soon will be closed surrounding the Earth. It is already contaminating your plants, accelerating the life of the animals as well as that of man. The belt is the nuclear byproduct of Earth? Yes, but in addition to the nuclear residues, you also have inorganic residues of other forms of breakdown, for example, the contamination of the cities. Remember that the more gases are heated, the more they rise. Is there any solution to this? I asked, truly worried. This is a latent threat still when man decides not to carry out any further nuclear tests. From that hour on, it will take more than 40 years for this gaseous mineral belt to disperse. In the same manner, the oldest of the satellites still will not lose their danger even after 2075. Of course, in some manner, the scientists of your planet could discover some kind of antidote for that which you are thinking, but this also will take plenty of time, of your time. How would you resolve this situation? We possess a delicate system of recollecting the space waste. It is a work that must be carried out continuously. If not, it accumulates in enormous quantities of residue material above us. I must clarify to you that we on our planet do not produce this waste material, those who travel in space, because we have discovered a way to neutralize it. The belt that surrounds your planet has been converted to a magnet that draws all kinds of bodies in space. These could be gaseous or organic bodies as well as minerals. A time will come when it will be practically impossible to eliminate. Only with a powerful neutralizer can you reduce to a minimum the capacity or danger. You do not use combustibles? Our combustible does not contain elements like yours. We use inertia for power and hydrogen for energy. The situation is better from here, which is there below. Don't you think? Leah, why? Look, I said, indicating the American continent. There below the sun begins to appear. Such is life. Sometimes it is dark, other times rain, and after that the sun comes out. I have confidence that sometimes the sun illuminates the earth, like resplendent knowledge in the minds of all these men who rule the destinies of the various countries. We will arrive almost at dawn by your solar watch, said Leah as, if wanting to pass my words unanswered. Yes, I answered. We descended abruptly. A lethal belt is the only thing we lack in this hazardous world. The automobile was exactly in the place where we had left it. Leah said goodbye to me and, embarrassed to the last fiber of my being, got in the car and headed for my house. The road on the return was different. I did not feel tired. All the problems that before had robbed tranquility from my life seemed minuscule compared to that which I had observed. That was when I decided to write this down, if not for my generation, then for posterity, which, still unusual for me, had been lived at the side of that beautiful woman of space, enchanting Leah. You are descended from a great race which destroyed itself, Leah told me in one of our many encounters. She looked at the sky and indicated an indeterminate point in the universe. I have told you before that your ancestors were not born from this planet. Many years ago they inhabited a very important world situated beyond Sion in this same galaxy. Those men had almost reached perfection. Their physical state was optimal, their emotional state tranquil with a tendency toward the spiritual sublime. The scientists possessed a knowledge without limits, and they were profoundly aware of a great part of the secrets of the universe. It was then, when filled with arrogance and anxious for power, they set out in pursuit of the universe. They desired to set themselves above the colonies on their frontiers. They became ambitious for triumph and glory. That is how it began. When man entered into conflicts of possession, all became more difficult, and there is where the decline began. In that epoch, which can only be measured through cycles of arc in the universe, One folk developed friction with another, and your ancestors decided to intervene with all. And they possessed powerful arms that could eliminate any system no matter how great it was. Other folk came to the aid of those who found themselves disadvantaged. Thus began one of the greatest conflagrations in memory. The arms employed by them caused grave damage to the human race, and the descendants of those who survived began to demonstrate important signs of mental dystrophy and emotional and physical instability. It was then, as I have said before, after conscientious analysis, their DNA had suffered important mutations. The scientists who carried out these studies comprehended the incapacity to make war without prejudicing their own folk. As you know, the deoxyribonucleic acid carries in itself an interesting register of the personality of the individual in question himself, which at birth carries fixed signs of personality. The question was whether the DNA had been seriously affected and that nobody leave the area in which there still prevailed important radioactive clouds irradiating the race. Your race, which would not survive for many generations. The situation was thus when they finally solicited the help of greater civilizations, but man was dying rapidly. Our own comparisons desired not to expose themselves extensively to these radiations. Finally, aid came, but when these began to evacuate the survivors, the knowledgeable, the scientists, and the great men of profound intelligence had died. Those greater civilizations carrying out the operation suggested that the human race as such would not survive very long. They would have to restrain their destructive impulses a great deal because, at a certain time in the future, this could throw back to all the negative aspects. I will explain. The explosion to which you were exposed stimulated the degeneration of certain cells of cerebral neurons. Those men were hysterical, insane, and violence predominated in them. It was necessary to restrain these impulses. The greater civilizations made a judgment, and the men of advanced civilizations determined that man had lost the privilege of knowledge and even of life, and that those same scientists had completely destroyed the great manuscripts of knowledge which had been acquired over thousands of years and preserved for the superiority of the race and the prolongation of its life. Over the passage of time, man never gained control between the good and the bad, and this was detected by the advanced civilizations. It was in this manner that this same man lost his place in the universe. All this abyss of ambition, power, etc., would remain seated in the mind at least of those same ones who would acquire the power of knowledge to overcome that which for them was hidden. Because of that, those races were injured by a limitation of mind due to the dystrophy suffered by the DNA, for which it will take years and many generations until you again, through heredity and persistence, rediscover the greater knowledge of life which paradoxically you intend to come to through the knowledge of death. Upon discovering the atom, you also discovered its destruction, thus not the origin of life. This was the sentence of man, self-destruction, being a greater tendency toward death than toward life. That was seated in the DNA, and as such will persist for the centuries, time of your world. Some descendants who preserved intact certain qualities overleaped much in between in your world, such as artists, violinists, writers, priests, and finally even the scientists. Thus it was how you again began to open a breach in the fields of science. It was as if the internal DNA remembered the glorious past with flashes of artificial light, but this will resurge when some of the ramifications less affected ere resurging as an effect of heritage. Then the race is in decline, I asked. In effect, you have said it, Professor. There still are beings whose pure nature was not such affected by it since they had not become knowledgeable. This is what is referred to the Nordic race. The black, the red, and the yellow races have another origin. Am I perhaps descended from the Nordic race? I ask, really surprised, because my skin is not white, but more reddish. Your ancestors were of that race which arose in Europe and later dispersed toward the Pyrenees and countries below, coming even to the United States. Well then, another important factor would be the arrival of great magnetic clouds that act as a stimulant upon the mind of man. Remember that energy can stimulate, creating fountains of light of memory, like sparks coming through the tunnel of time. For this reason, science has developed at this time. Bright minds that have descended from pure races have been receiving, by amplification of the DNA and genes, knowledge arriving from an inconceivable beyond. These same men were attracted to it by certain actual potencies, and a new cycle has been initiated. Undoubtedly, you have also inherited from your ancestors the irremediable tendency toward destruction. The human being finally, after many centuries of surviving, and by titanic labors of reproduction confronted by climactic crises, has arrived at the point from which he departed. Why did they leave or permit these races to subsist? Why did those intelligent men offer to save a decadent race that derives from an enormous voice of hidden origin that each one of the races or great civilizations in the universe know and must respect? Life is one of such values, the right to spring forth. To vibrate in accord with the universal notes must be respected. As there does not exist one single being identical with another in your country, we cannot as a community reject anyone only because he is not apt. We would be degrading our own civilization if we did but lend help to those who solicit it. But if the man is condemned to destroy himself, then why live? Many of your congenerationals ask the same, why live? Though there also are too many who say to themselves, why not? The watchword, amply promised to all the civilizations of the universe, the great objective. The challenge that is presented not only to your species, but to all the species disseminated throughout the galaxies, is the survival of your own species. As such, with all your purity, you are renewed by means of one descending from another. If this had been intended for your ancestors, and each one of those who lived as your ancestors had understood it, the human race would have improved notably, but that was not the case. The legacy to all the races is the knowledge, the eternal discovery, as if to live in a box of surprises among which you daily discover something fascinating. They continue to search unfruitfully for the chemical changes to which you were exposed in the origin of your existence, to arrive again perhaps at the destruction, always believing fictitious reasons for it, a form of justification for your impetus to violence. To measure the elapse of years, R.N. has been complicating his life. I have a vague idea of that which occurred to intervene in the chemical change at the organic level of the life of man. Because you understand me, I can tell you finally that I have come to believe that man himself has inherited a monster inside of him, against which he has to struggle all his life and at the same time coexist, sleep, eat, love, if that is possible, reproduce himself, and finally die. Though this monster does not exist in space-time, in the cycle of existence, death represents no barrier to it. Will this hypothetical monster finally overcome? It has already overcome on various occasions, and it is implanted above in many human beings. This monster produces envy, doubts, jealousy, and hate. Whenever we have delivered our contribution to life, your children, engendered within a hereditary imperfection, will acquire that monster in which is accumulated all kinds of more or less negative tendencies. The race and your tremendous and titanic force to survive militates against the fears, suspicions many times unfounded of venalities of mind whose labyrinths are inexpugnable, has within itself a very long-standing charge, which is to populate the world without discarding the responsibility to create a race within a parameter of superliving, such that it comes to be a model for other species, demonstrating thus the capacity of engender not only to make it, but to obtain the subsistence of the race. Nothing more than that. No, man in himself is more complicated than that which he apparently shows to the eyes of other civilizations. His mission for the moment will be to continue the species until the same will be aided by other greater civilizations, with the objective of finding the antidote, to call it such, to salvage and restore the magnificence lost to the DNA. Because, though you may not believe it, or it seems harebrained to you, man belongs to a race in danger of extinction. Will anyone come to save our humanity? Yes, the greatest responsibility of the men of our greater civilizations is that some community must be imposed, and the truth is that they are confronted by the effects already devastating of the antithesis of life. Against it exists nothing that you could do, for which those of your folk must struggle to survive without rupturing the harmony of equilibrium. When something has already suffered permanent mutations, it is more difficult to accomplish your recuperation. Perhaps our greater civilizations can achieve this completely, after which you will see green fields and blue skies, in which you not only observe the survival of one man, or of all your humanity, but its complete emancipation. Extraterrestrial concepts of energy. Leah, the woman who claimed she came from a distant place beyond our star group called Inkstria, Mexican pronunciation, or Anstria, had ruptured the foundation of scientific skepticism, leaving it an embarrassment to an earthman, according to her accounts to me. That Thursday I had sat down to write up all that I could remember of my interview with Leah in that garden of the city of Cuernavaca. Soon the recollections vibrated in my mind, and I began to write that which Leah had told me. The scientists of your planet will discover, around 1990 or a little before, new sources of energy coming from space. In the course of recent years, there has been lively interact in the energy which surrounds some planets in greater quantity than others, because not all celestial bodies vibrate with the same intensity of energy. But it will be around the end of 1985 when they will become more interested in the satellites of planets than the planets themselves. Phobos and Deimos, moons of the planet Mars, contain an energy greater than the terrestrial satellite, the moon. This will make the scientists of your planet come to execute some erroneous changes which later they themselves will correct. Due to the confirmation of those bodies attentive to the fact that their characteristics are very strange, they will think that these bodies were seeded artificially, or that a strange, most powerful force had brought them to that place through space. What happened in truth was that a superior civilization initiated some thousands of years ago a reconstruction of energy of the systems that surround the star group, and I refer to that to which you pertain. This superior civilization to which I refer can be found in a star group near your own, which we have called Pleions. Returning to the strange characteristics of the satellites, I can inform you that some lost a great part of their power when there occurred the collision in your solar system. 5. Collision? I asked. All of the planets of your solar system took part in that collision. Ah, yes, now I remember. You have told me something about that. Very well. When the interspatial patrols took notice of the anomaly that existed in the energy of said bodies, they initiated an operation really impressive for its delicacy and immense proportion. To reimplant the satellites in their pieces. Some were surrounded and injected with pure energy. Other planets had one satellite in orbit. The Earth originally had no satellite that was found in the 4th place in the solar system. As a consequence of the collision one day, it lost its motion, and the planet experienced great convulsions as well as continuous changes in polar magnetization, for which the Earth began to disperse itself, and the orbit became more dense. The great extension of land on the Earth opened up and formed into continents and islands. Other land was inundated forever. The planet became very chaotic for the existence of life. It was studied so intently that on some occasions they came to discover reptiles on the surface, and all others were covered by enormous seas. Plankton were found on the tops of a mountain, and trees were broken off at their roots and lay on the bottom of the ocean. The planet released great quantities of its own energy in its uncertain orbit, for which the level of life was insecure. They consecrated themselves to revitalizing the planet. After an urgent interplanetary meeting in view of the possibility that the system could be in grave danger of causing more and more collisions even beyond that which you call the Pleiades, a community of superiors was invited to see what they could do about the desperate situation. And with the help of projectors of condensed energy, they slowly saved the orbit. If this procedure had been carried cut with a certain rapidity, the planet could have succumbed to the violent shock of energies, internally and externally. By this route they found, when they discovered this, that it was necessary to place a rectifier satellite in orbit, and they adopted the moon. For that advanced community this was easy, but for other communities still in development, such as mine, this was astonishing. To register the helpful procedures, and due to the existence of an important treaty and external help that existed, it was necessary that all knowledges that were a part of the operation be registered in the archives of the universe as precedents for those inhabitants of planets still behind in measures of help such as this. To construct systems to this level much aids other communities, therefore even for the advanced community this effort was relatively simple. Other communities agreed that this was an authentic wonder. The interior civilizations did not have the capacity to recognize the true value of such means, but this also is because of their scarce comparative knowledges. Because of this, the scientists of your Earth will find that each one of those satellites to which I refer, Phobos and Deimos, emit different energies, and that some orbit in different directions from the others. This is a consequence of having orbited toward only one point before the solar holocaust, and that after, by the same impact, caused the same body to orbit on a point diametrically opposite. Though they could not correct the movement there, it was possible to conserve the same balance with the imposition of two satellites that would neutralize its orbital sensitivity. Phobos and Deimos were adapted as energizers. Are you telling me that some satellites are artificial the moon also? Not only some satellites. In other stellar agrupations there are truly extraordinary implants. For example, they have succeeded in reviving one star threatened with the end of life of 2 inhabited planets that received its heat and which, by the function of photosynthesis, conducted. The life there is not like that of your planet. It is not exactly a beautiful world like yours. But the star, despite its time of life not being long, has succeeded in retaining there some specimens, and for such its function is indispensable. The manner in which they made calculations and extracted great quantities of energy that in turn was injected was by methods that perhaps to you would seem incredible. When they inject pure energy, they use the same energy as the injector. It may surprise you to know that 1 cubic decimeter of energy accumulated and concentrated in accordance with the most advanced procedures could supply your sun with enough that it could function hundreds of millions of years more. Is that possible? I asked. Leah did not pay much attention to my gesture of surprise and continued speaking. The oxygen can also be concentrated to a level sufficient for one planet, in which it is indispensable to realize experiences where, in the scarcity of oxygen, they construct transparent cupolas out of solid titanium imbued with crystallized oxygen, which is then placed in a resupplier of oxygen. In this manner, it can obtain for itself an ample supply in a determined place. The superior civilizations continually advance in their scientific plans so much that in actuality it is not necessary to concentrate oxygen in cupolas like we do it, but they transform all of the planet in accordance to its needs. For this I tell you that it is very important that you know the principal energies of the molecule. At least you should understand that in space all is controlled to a level of energy by inertia. What else have you seen in your crystal ball? I asked sardonically and amused. You are no longer as skeptical as at the beginning of our friendship, and I have no crystal ball nor any other things. I, like many of my cohabitants, do not possess a sphere of crystal, but know many things about your planet because we have studied it consciously. You know that upon observing how you use the energy power in your world, we showed surprise and worry, because altogether such use of that same energy, due to the scarcity of appropriate places to store it, is wasteful. Toward the end of 1986, it will be possible for your scientists to obtain new forms of energy in their laboratories, very rudimentary to be sure. All this comes to the terrestrials in their search for new supplies of alimentation, but that is not exactly what impels them. More likely trying to place themselves in the vanguard of knowledge, to use this to their own advantage. But all is in vain if they do not possess the true knowledge of the energy that vibrates in every cell. For example, in past years we studied the British who tried to unite the cells of a chicken and yeast. In their turn, the American scientists, not desiring to remain behind, tried to fuse human cells with cells of the tobacco plant. It was judged that you were doing this in the way of experiments on the cancer process. Nevertheless, nobody could achieve the fusion of one human cell with a vegetable cell, precisely because these are not in accord in energy. It is as if you tried to make a new and powerful weapon that would operate utilizing a fusion or combustion of gasoline and plutonium, speaking in terrestrial terms. Illogical and unnecessary? Thus it is. For that we can also tell you that these cellular unions could be achieved if they used a stabilizer of energy. The terrestrial scientists must take into account the vibrational grade of energy. Carrots do not require such an amount of energy for their propagation as human cells. Nevertheless, success will be attained, and they will encounter a protein that can reproduce itself with a minimum of care even in the most rustic of laboratories. At first it will require a minimal of solar energy, but later these scientists will be surprised of its unusual volume each time it grows, and this will be such that there will not remain room for those scientists in said laboratories. It will be a hopeful step for the hungry. It will be experimented with first in the poor countries such as India and Nigeria. But unfortunately, this also will provoke dependency, and the producing country could come to be a manipulator. Who will discover it? A group of scientists. Can you see through time? Not necessarily, she responded. Perhaps we could discover marvels in space and advance ourselves in time. The same occurs in your world when you travel. If you travel toward the east, you gain a day, and vice versa. We have discovered that if we align our ships toward the east, we run the risk of arriving at a civilization or two before yours. 1 degree is perhaps sufficient to retard the process of our cycle, or of that which you call time. If we advance toward the north, we can fall into the error of arriving beyond the year 2030. The universe is inscrutable, even for us, if we do not know enough to conduct ourselves in accordance with natural law. Newits. 1. 6 cell in hibernation. You said you would tell me a secret, I said, remembering an earlier visit, which at the end of the talk had left me profoundly intrigued. Yes, that is true. I shall talk to you of something which perhaps you know of as electronic clonation, one which in our world is denominated as something that you could translate as cell in hibernation. You, and I refer to your scientists, advance in this field, but they still have not had enough time. The system of cloning was initiated as a means of safeguarding those civilizations on their way to extinction. The procedure to follow is to start out precisely to extract living cells and hibernate then. In space there are many races which, for different reasons, have not proliferated normally. The Earth at one time was a paradise in which lived civilizations extinct today. It was then when the communities of superior civilizations decided to salvage some of them. When your planet offered a certain security, there began to arrive more and more populations. The first were white of Nordic type and tall, but they had to be placed in an optimum level of climate for their survival. Some races develop better in desert climates, and others develop better in cold climates. Thus, there arrived whites, blacks, coppers, yellows, etc. Was there already one race resident on the earth? Yes. The Egyptians who were found settled in what is now the Nile River. Each folk has to arrive at being self-sufficient. It was then when they began to train themselves to sow what they ate. Also, they gave classes on the quality of alimentation that each group should have to be adequate for its organic needs. Since all the races are distinct, each one should know its own metabolism. The Japanese and the Chinese manifested genetic characteristics different from the black races, whose organism is adaptable to almost any climate and any alimentation. At first all went marvelously, but what was initiated with success presented problems. After several of years, the implantation of the races was no longer effective. Later, the root of the proliferation of man had grown in power, and any invasion of any terrain represented war. The red and the copper races were the first to arrive, and also the inheritors of the interplanetary knowledge. They had obtained such evolution, moral and social, that they were not massacred and worthily represented the man of earth. The superior civilizations had foreseen that he who loved war would end up dominating the planet, and so it is. Once the Earth changed into a cosmopolitan planet, the social type of problems began. It was evident that something was failing and that man was incapable of adapting himself socially every time he presented a chaotic appearance. Each one of the integral members of the race believed he had the privilege of inheriting from his ancestors' land, conquered at the price of blood. The greater men of your planet have died with the idea that peace each time would be more utopic. Those men carried the primary clones in hibernation, and they began to implant clones in each group, with the final result that each one of them would succeed in awakening in the terrestrial human the consciousness of survival. The clone, how did you discover that something like this existed? I asked. Each time some prominent or important or valiant one of the intergalactic community found himself in danger of dying, it would come to him and utilize one of his cells. Then it would produce a new being, eliminating all kinds of infirmities. To what end? To retain his knowledge. Did he achieve this? Now yes, but at first a totally hybrid being was obtained, of which they say hybrid because his cells will not serve as clones afterward. Nevertheless, the conscience of universal level elevated him to a different stratus, without the instincts of aggression. He had almost attained to optimum individuality. Original clones of the primitive body were jealously guarded by the scientists, who deposited these in laboratories located in inaccessible places, for example, in high mountains. They froze those at low temperatures, to the end that several centuries might pass and they could then be converted back into thinking beings. The means by which they are perfecting the system of electronic donation overcomes many deficiencies. For example, in actuality, it is no longer necessary to deposit them in frozen places. Today they program the clone of themselves to survive an indeterminate number of cycles of time, and this, in the same manner as the memory is controlled together with the objective. This achieved through an electronic magnetic energetic stimulus, for which we tell you that it is important to know all of this when we comment on your understandings. Today, when the community of superior races decide that some member of whatever race merits the privilege of eternity, they effect the donation, but at a very high level which at times not even I myself comprehend. It is said that they have separated from matter, and only the memory persists in being indescribably knowledgeable, who generates his own energy. They create a chemical electrical augmentation similar to that required in your gestation. When the determined being desires to be material, what does he need to be chosen? To be like you? Appropriately? No. We have ample knowledge about life. We can be pure energy or organic material. The materialization is important for those of us interested in studying the conglomeration of planets and the proliferation of human beings of diverse races. Those civilizations who obtain the knowledge of longevity, as you call the natural prolongation of life, do not necessarily desire to be chosen, as you call it, though in any case, we desire to remain in the perspective of an eternity. How old are you, Leah? The day I tell you my ace, you will not believe it. I am 900 of your years, and 2 cycles of arc of ours old. Our scientists have acquired the knowledge of longevity, and utilizing it rationally, they succeed in augmenting the possibility of integrating us to the great community from where has emerged great personages. Why? I asked. Why? The life on my planet is more fascinating than you can imagine. Suppose that also on the Earth each one preferred the habitat to which he is accustomed. I travel much, dream continually of things that I see, know an infinity of knowledge, and my life has scarcely begun. What purpose has life? I asked. Life has the objective of overcoming the confusion when you are manifesting the antithesis of the energetico-magnetic life, whether it be you or I, but not in a struggle to death, which in fact it is. What I want to say is, not in a war as you are accustomed to on the earth. The struggle is inside to create virtues and to correct defects. I told you before that life in itself as a principle is an electromagnetic state of memory. Very well, when you are born in that memory, you come as a concentrated collection of knowledge which you later discover by inertia. To create a balanced aspect in your life is your true struggle. You will have to raise one grade of intelligence to a grade such that your memory will serve to prolong your survival. Because in your world they survive, struggling against the feelings and the qualities. Thus is initiated the true battle within oneself. The positivism, perhaps? No, rather a calm emotional state. Upon achieving this, you will realize interesting phenomena in yourself. One person who has acquired the true tranquility emits a different flow of energy to that which continually is restless within himself. Some allow this species of monster that grows within them to dominate. Some succumb, some are destroyed, some overcome, some confront and triumph. That is already programmed in your memory forever. Then you will pass to a level above many. The energetic flow will accomplish changes in you, and in this manner will convert you into a kind of jewel to be redeemed. But when your tendencies are of leadership, authentic director of deeds, then you will be redeemable. The communities of superior civilizations will appear to you, redeeming you according to your achievements. But look now, let us change the theme a little, because I want to show you something. In reviewing the past and feelings, I must advise you that what you are going to see now will have peculiar characteristics. You will be able to remember it only if you thus prefer it. Here, she said, placing her hand ever something that seemed to me like a tiny metal plate stuck to the wall. This is what you desire to know, not only of me, but of other persons as well. I will put my hand above and you place yours below. I did this, and there suddenly appeared one scene on a screen of some 43 x 50 centimeters. There was Leah when she was a baby in a room without furniture, many buttons on the wall, and an enormous screen. Her parents were found in a simple laboratory with enormous windows in the roof, apparently as if they belonged to a community of interplanetary investigators. "They are my parents," said Leah. "That is the moment in which they solicited permission to engender a little girl child. The children engendered must be desired. They solicit the help of the scientists to induce a birth with all advantages for the new being." "Through a cyclone?" No, assured Leah immediately. I laughed. I saw much earlier when the parents of Leah were young. It is going back to the past, she informed me. "Yes, is it a movie?" I asked. "No, each one of my cells, and the same with yours, remember all the past happenings of my life, and though the major archive is in the brain, all of your lives are stored in detail in all of your being." "Would you like to test it?" she asked. "Can I ask intimate things?" I said, looking at her. "Oh!" She smiled in a manner so candid and innocent that I blushed. Place your hand above, she said, and I will not place mine in a manner that we can observe only what you desire. I placed my hand and saw the face of my daughter Norma and of Rodolfo, my elder son, looking at TV in his bedroom. I saw my wife reposing in siesta and desired with all my soul that she could have the 900 years of Leah and be as her, young and beautiful. Leah looked at me understanding. After that, she said, "Is that all you want to know?" At that moment, I looked to my mother, already having passed on, going and coming about her little house, caring for her birds and parrots on Coyoacan. While I had my hand on that delicate plaque, all that came to my mind was converted into living images. "Leah, what are those remembrances to you?" I asked while nostalgically observing my mother. "To me," said Leah, "those memories are the truth of life. In my community, memories are the living treasures of man, the emotional structures of that which is suspended in your personality, and the columns is of your existence." "And for you, what are the memories?" she asked. "For me?" I answered, "Well, at times the memories are not so beautiful. If I continue with my hand on the place observing my mother, I will end up crying." "It is not a plate," she said. "It is an ultrasensor of intercellular plasma energy. Those memories are energy-active plasma. What surprises me about you is the definition of your sentiments through your memories. That tendency to yearn for the past and see your mother originated in yourself, and since now she is no longer here, it must be brutal. Each time you succeed in controlling your emotions, you increase in soul strength. Don't you have feelings?" "Feelings, yes, we know how to control the negative emotions, and we control and take advantage of the positives. Due to the lack of emotional control, your planet is in decline. On our planet, the only thing that we possess is the knowledge. If we fight for possession of territory, we would be descending an animal level, and after all, when the existence of the beings here who have the promise of higher life transpires, the bodies must stay here. The Earth, like all other planets, remains in the same place. Perhaps with new inhabitants, the same country will not be the same, but will be in the same place. If we do not control our emotions, ego, envy, and greed will cause us to retrogress at the cost of our emotional equilibrium. This would be a great tragedy for the people of our community. There is no bad on your planet. Bad, precisely no. There comes to exist what one accumulates, such as knowledge. Without sharing it, that provokes an imbalance. But up to now, I have not witnessed anything like this, at least not on Inkstria. 8 prophecies. You said you had some prophecies for me. You like prophesize? That is a characteristic of the people of your particular planet. They desire to hear things of the future, such as an advice of good fortune. This desire is programmed in your mind because the human being before used to be able to see farther into the future than present man. A continuation of this, I can tell you, can be accomplished only by retaining the equilibrium of mutual affection and assistance. What are you trying to say? That only in case you do not destroy yourselves completely can you learn. How? I asked, not understanding. Look, in your year 2015, you will be enabled to obtain energy from sound. Sound could bring you energy of a power unsuspected, but only of tuned vibrational sound. It must be a vibration like the chord of a violin or a guitar or a flute or a pipe. Vibrational music can accomplish marvelous things. In our world, music is revealed as a treasure for the energization of whatever specimen of energy is around. Beings from other worlds come to Anstrea to observe the vibrational changes of sound and their extent. But there is something that you would not imagine. The energy of sound serves to preserve bodies or cadavers. Sound also can always be used to control the climate when it is executed sufficiently fine and in one vibratory wave so as not to provoke error. It also helps to heat a habitation without irritating the inhabitants. This same can be an invincible weapon because sound in a note sufficiently high and sharp can provoke earthquakes. How interesting. I responded, on the proposition or earthquakes, what is the cause of those? Have you found the solution in the movements of earth? When the earth opened and formed the continents, dispersing them and creating what you call errant poles, and which for us is a loss of energy. The components of the earth also were implicated in the equilibrium of metals, mercury, iron, uranium, petroleum, etc., in the same manner as minerals in the human organism. When these are dispersed, the earth loses absorbance of that natural energy. Some planets have discovered a quite simple formula for avoiding great disasters and unnecessary loss of life. Enormous needles of determined thickness, whose components are all the minerals known to you, plus oxygen, hydrogen, iacerosic, as well as copper, which is a good conductor and a substance that has its origin in the liberation of energy in the friction of minerals. And what you yourselves do not know, and what we call temen, were used to neutralize the seismic activity. If you neutralize this, you eliminate the movement. Some inhabitants of other planets of the galaxy from which they come have discovered a very simple formula for avoiding great disasters and unnecessary casualties. Enormous movements of rock and floods cause changes in riverbeds in many countries. The manner in which they implant the above-mentioned needles attracts precisely the energy from the minerals in question, and its liberation is minor. The needles of determined thickness, and whose components are described above, attract the energy that liberates the earth a little before the earthquake and transforms it into some form utilizable with the double purpose of reducing or minimizing the seismic activity and to condense a high quantity of the energy. The waves are collected with the same system of attraction and absorption through the needles disposed strategically in highly telluric places. Some other planets have a system of congealing the Earth that is highly seismic to reduce its potential to a minimum of 5% to 0 through a system of absorption of energy. The congealed Earth does not experience too much movement, at least that which suffers a sudden change of temperature, or other planets where the radiating star is deficient. They artificially create clouds which provoke neutralizing rays in the seismic zones, dulcifying them gradually. I looked at her fixedly and asked, "How many planets do you know?" "I have lost count, but I can tell you that it is more than, well, let us say 3,000 to 4,000 investigated by the group or in the laboratories of Anstrea. By this time there must be more, many more than that." "At what basic velocity do you travel?" "That depends on the energy of each ship. Ours can achieve something like 300,000 of your kilometers per hour or more." "That is too much, don't you think? Other civilizations travel much faster." "Do you like that work?" She looked at me greatly surprised. "Work? On our planet we are conditioned to investigate through the knowledge of the stars, and our greatest love is for knowledge. The watchword, to know. Our minds are endowed with receptivity for knowledge, and that is really the destiny of our community. Through knowledge they obtain innumerable advances. Have you studied our system? Yes. When your solar system was relatively new for us, we saw and counted 16 planets. But we suppose that you might have more, taking into account that one average star comes to retain in its orbit more or less 32 planets, of which only the first 10 to 12 receive, in accordance with their orbital phase, energy from the star, sufficient to surround said body through its own energy guide. What is the energy guide? The energy that the star emits to drive its planets. Don't you understand? You will understand when I tell you that energy attracts energy for its same characteristics, in the manner that as the sun emits its heat in one refractory step, it is returned to the same star, a kind of interchange that at length serves to guide the planets. The star possesses a strong attraction for the planets, without which these would not derive their motion. Does our world resist the assaults of solar changes? Yes, if the solar energy diminishes or increases, your world would truly resist it. The rotation and the density of energy are important factors for a planet. The temperature and the pressure determine the lapse of its existence. If these are altered, it changes the life on the planet in question. Did you know our planet before it was populated? When your world was conceived, it already had cycles of arc by the hundreds, remaining in its orbit. But nevertheless, at a certain time of yours to this date, we have been your cosmic connection. Your ancestors knew perfectly well our existence. Some lived in superior civilizations through a conception by means of a clone. Why? I already explained to you that the Hindu was a folk that established itself on earth in the beginnings of life as we know it on the planet. Those who readied an optimum level of consciousness were extracted. Did the ancient folk know about the atom? Yes, they had taken precautions not to use it arbitrarily. Nevertheless, there were people who used it indiscriminately, like in your society today. Put your hand on the ultrasensor and you can see, if you like, the arsenals of any of the powers of the world. I placed my hand and effectively saw with stupefaction the deposits of thermonuclear weapons. Those are the so-called ogives, Leah said to me. If you condensed all of that energy and extracted only one drop of it, you could place in march the engine of one airplane for 100 years without it descending to land. But you have controlled the atom arbitrarily and indiscriminately so much that it is no wonder to the community of advanced civilizations that man will terminate his days at the mercy of an error. You possess an atomic neutralizer, isn't that correct? Yes, but I know what you are thinking. You know that we are prohibited using it against the weapons of the societies. You have seen that we neutralized atomic collisions in the sea to save the maritime flora and fauna. But this cannot always be done. We do this out of respect for life, but not to steal the accumulation of energy that you possess. That is a respected point which the major advanced civilizations guarantees to all societies and to all planets, always and when they do not spill innocent blood, because that also implies a fallback to the beginning of the stellar community. But you asked me if the ancient societies knew how to use the atom, didn't you? Yes, I responded. Very well. The pyramids do not present to simple view what they really are and why they were really constructed. Those form an equilateral rhomboid. The rhombus divides the rhomboid in the middle at ground level, and the other half is underground. Many things are connected to beings from other star groups. Do you know why? Because this may show that on other planets also exists the knowledge of the accumulation of energy. The knowledge set down in one pyramidal body will show you the track or the trajectory through which pass persons of other planets disseminating the knowledge. The form of each one of them will come to show the advance of their knowledges and the line of the lineage of your civilization. For this you see different pyramidal constructions, the length of your planet. In our last meeting, you spoke to me about terrestrial regions in which you still detect residues of the principle of the vortex. What is that? The force and the movement of the vortex can be compared to that of cyclones, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc., though the origin is much more complicated than it seems in these atmospheric manifestations, which have only a slight speed compared to the magnetic vortex. A vortex is born in a form similar to a drain tube, and it is named for this primitive form. The whirlpools in the sea show us that they are not only detected in the air, but in the seas also. What happens is that the vortex can form in the flux of certain minerals in the earth, as well as in the water. Many years ago, the civilizations that preceded the Great Holocaust controlled these forces irresponsibly through the concentration of stores of this energy that accumulated. Imagine guarding in storage the force of some 10, 20, or 30 hurricanes. Man discovered that he could do great things with this, from provoking rain where precipitation was not frequent to places his enemies had stored things susceptible to loss as a consequence of a cyclone. Today also exist forms of attracting rains. This is only a beginning. Well then, the force of this vortex would be sufficient to divide a city in two or to submerge a village of fishermen. This was never foreseen in your eagerness to accumulate more and more classes of energy. There are places where still can be found generators of this force that can destroy all that is around it. All energy moves through a constant reabsorber and reunites. Energy also reproduces itself if it is not extracted from its original field. But if the accumulation in an apparently secure place surpasses the level of containment, it will struggle to get out. Oxygen and hydrogen are energy, but only two of the many types of energy that there are. Many forms of energy in space are counterproductive to the atmosphere of your planet and could produce an explosion of incalculable reach. Every movement of wind helps to increase the friction of the waves. The blow of wind is not material to that which accelerates its rotation. Each energy has its own characteristics. Well then, the greater energy always will be in the vortex, in pyramidal form. And observe that the majority of the more resistant constructions left to posterity by your ancestors have this form. Who would imagine storing energy in a vortex inside of a pyramidal vortex? They discovered accidentally that only a storage container with that form could retain, without serious consequences, the energy of the vortex. Then is the stereotype of the atom like energy? The atom is energy, you are energy, and L, the animals of your world, are energy. Energy always will take the form of a vortex. Prophecy fulfilled. One of the more important prophecies that Leah revealed to me seemed to me to be more than a prediction, a warning. My life had been slipping from surprise to surprise since I had come to know her. She had made me feel a fortunate human being, and consequently, through her discussions, had awakened in me a feeling of knowledge of such dimensions that I had come to believe that Leah possessed much more of divinity than of woman. On other occasions she had offered me proofs by predicting political results which in their time occurred as predicted: the death of Anwar Sadat, the attempted assassination of the President of the United States of Ronald Reagan, the death of Brezhnev 1 year before the event and the premature death of Andropov, as well as the attempted assassination suffered by the Pope, plus catastrophic floods, heavy snows, and severe earthquakes, were all predicted with surprising accuracy. Over a lapse of 5 years, Leah had predicted political events that came to pass exactly as she said. For such, when she spoke of a future imminent danger for humanity, when I still could not imagine what it would be, I was afraid that it was something really serious. We will be in the province, a few kilometers from the field. We will meet them. She told me days before our meeting. It was obvious that after having listened for more or lost 10 years to Leah, I had come to know much of her, but also I had learned too much about my own world. She surprisingly induced me to see all of those events and observe her, without involving myself, not even emotionally, in what happened. Now something was occurring within me. I felt depressed and experienced an expectant anxiety. I noticed in her words a certain formality unusual for her. I knew, and later had the opportunity to verify, that when something strange occurred in the life of anyone leaving consequences, I would imagine from the moment that it began, I believed in Leah and her teachings, which apart from her the happenings, would stir up a torrent of surprise. We met one month of May by a village near Michoacan. That Thursday I arrived with noticeable anticipation. I was convinced that Leah would take priority in my life, and she knew it. I experienced a certain agitation inside of me. What was that she had told me? Why had she made this appointment in such a strange and isolated place? While I arrived, I had walked around the place a little. The sun shined splendidly and the air was saturated with aromas emanated by fruit trees planted around the small white cottages distributed one by one along the side of the road there. The oxygen that I breathed there seemed to nurture my spirit. Suddenly she arrived. She was in front of me with that fresh smile and all of the beauty that simply illuminated her completely. She was attired in her black pantsuit with the light blue buttons seeming like an image drawn from a science fiction movie. I took out my cigarette case and selected one, lit it, and inhaled the smoke profoundly. I felt indecisive, anxious to know that which she would tell me, and fearful at the same time about what she might say. I was afraid also that those days were the last of our friendship. And also I felt that my days were slowly coming to an end. All passes, all transpires, all flows in the existence of man. Leah now not only was my friend, my advisor, my informer, but had found such submergence in my life that to extract her, pull her out, leave off seeing her, was going to provoke a trauma in me. The one moment that scarcely stretched to perceive the face of her was overshadowed upon seeing a splendid butterfly that happily flew by next to us. Days before this she had commented to me that they would be carrying out labors of a social type in a place near Morelia. She took me by the hand. It was an enduring sensation that had made me feel like a colleague. Leah had the particularity of living in my memory even when her absences were prolonged. Upon contact with her hand, my anxieties went up in smoke completely. Do not fear. I know that you think that we may not come back together to see each other, but there still will be more occasions, depending on many things, but fundamentally on our investigations. She had let go of my hand and we were walking slowly. She inserted her hands in the lateral pockets of her jacket and I continued smoking. Leah, I said suddenly, breaking the silence, you met me here for something which supposedly is very important. Isn't that so? She turned on her heels and looking at me face to face said, "Yes, Professor, you have been an inestimable friend during much time of your cycle. Though for me, seeing each other and talking has been relatively very little. I have enjoyed very beautiful instances at your side, and I learned I admired you for your existential vibrations, and that terrestrials also know how to love intensely. We know those changes of conduct that have operated in you for one cycle of arc or another, and I can assure you that is for which your race is experiencing a change imperceptible to you, not only at an organic level, but genetically, besides reasonably and habitually. They move within boisterous confusion, like I said to you, and in continual modification. Your mode of life, dress, your studies, your work, your form of love of being, to exist and to fight, are changing in conference with those same events as is required. I can tell you that man himself will allow himself to be carried by the current of a river whose speed is dizzying. Man could change the process of his life, but he feels impotent to do it, and moreover to even try. Today, men of your world explore the past to find traces of collusions, to feel through that the reality of a world or epoch before which he could compare with this present civilization. Leah, I intervened. In my world, a very important scientific change has taken place in these last years. During the length of our friendship, you have told me of really surprising things. I have learned more about life than I have known during the whole time of my existence before. You have spoken of your world. To me, this is inspirational. But I fear that you are seeing some negative aspects of the planet Earth. I would like to ask you, is it perhaps that there would be still more and greater dangers awaiting humanity? Is it that it is not enough that man has reached a certain grade of bestial violence, for which the life on this planet still will see itself in greater dangers? Why then live if the existence does not offer any security to man? It is not the life. Professor, it is man himself who has not known the cause of his destiny, political, social, and economical. She lowered her gaze, and then she looked at me, and I saw a strange shine of resisted worry in her eyes. She touched her ring on her right hand, precisely on her index finger. We continued walking. The occasion began to collapse. The evening set in an orange color at the time when the earth discharges the incomparable smell of dried mud. "Professor," she said, breaking the silence in which we both were submerged, "look at how the sun sinks slowly in the west. You feel upon seeing that a certain indifference, because you know with a certainty that it will return one time after another, passing itself over the horizon. It will continue its path around the galaxy, toward the constellation that you call Hercules, but always dragging in its orbit planets, attracted to it by its powerful force of gravity. Life is not the same. Each day that passes will not return. You know in determined moments of your life that you can squander days of your indolent childhood, that you can profit by certain months of your youth trying to use them in study, but then when you approach maturity, decrepitude, when by the inertia of that which you call time, the body deteriorates. You know that each hour, that every minute that transpires will not return, and you then avoid the loss of one single instant. You have knowledge of the danger to which your world has been exposed through the atomic generation in its wide spectrum, but you and the men of Earth ignore the fact that you still must confront greater dangers that proceed from exterior space.